It's the dream of every princess and even a countess to receive 2 glittering boxes of near-precious jewels. But should the Countess of Wessex, the Queen's daughter-in-law, have accepted the gift from the King of Bahrain? And are the gemstones tainted and stained with the blood of pro-democracy activists? Hello and welcome to A Simple Question, your weekly roundup of views and opinions on the streets of London. I'm Phil Rees. In today's show, as Bahrain continues to suppress a pro-democracy movement, why does Britain's royal family have such close relations with its despotic rulers? Well, before we find out what the public thinks here on the streets of London, here's a short video clip.
Bahrain today offers no meaningful safeguards for human rights or a genuine democratic process. In February 2011, the Arab Spring had reached Bahrain. Thousands of protesters gathered in the Pearl roundabout area of the capital Manama. A few days later, police raided the demonstration in the early morning, killing 5 people and injuring dozens. In March, troops from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates entered Bahrain, with the stated aim of protecting oil and gas installations and financial institutions. There followed months of widespread arrests and allegations of human rights abuses, including torture. The UK provides training, including sniper skills and crowd control, to both Bahraini and Saudi security forces. It sells them CS hand grenades, tear gas and riot control agents. In addition, the British royal family enjoys close relations with their counterparts in Bahrain. The Crown Prince is known to be a good friend of the royals and has been seen with the Queen in the royal box at Ascot. He was invited to last year's royal wedding, but after public outrage decided it would be best to stay away. The Khalifa family regularly welcomes Prince Charles and Prince Andrew at his palaces during trips to promote British business. The Countess of Wessex was in Bahrain last December on behalf of the Queen when she was given her gems. One set of jewels came from the King of Bahrain, the other from the Prime Minister, Sheikh Khalifa bin Salman Al-Khalifa. The Prime Minister is the King's uncle and has held the post for 4 decades, making him the longest-serving unelected Prime Minister in the world. Labour MP Paul Flynn said Bahrain is one of the most oppressive governments in the Middle East and it is completely unacceptable for any figure in public life to accept gifts of this sumptuous value. Despite mounting criticism, Buckingham Palace insists that the Countess will not hand back the jewels because she received them on official royal business.
A Simple Question is a show that finds out what the public thinks here on the streets of London. I began today by asking what people knew about a gift by the King of Bahrain to a member of the British royal family. Was it stained with the blood of pro-democracy demonstrators?
I don't actually know anything about it, but if it's the case, then they should give it back, I think. Obviously, morally it's wrong, and I think that the way that our government and obviously other Western governments act, like in the global context, is always kind of in self-interest.
The King of Bahrain recently gave a member of the British royal family 2 boxes of gems. What do you know about that?
I don't know anything in particular. I haven't actually heard of the story, but I think it would rouse some level of suspicion, especially considering some of the activity that's gone out there in the past.
I don't think it's right. I think the monarchy should do something about it and actually speak out with regards to the Bahraini giving this blood diamonds.
It's quite funny that the British government fights so much for human rights while it actually violates human rights itself. And I think that there should be an investigation and some transparency around that. So members of the royal family should actually declare what they're getting from the King of Bahrain. And if these are blood diamonds, then they definitely shouldn't get it.
The King of Bahrain recently gave a member of the royal family some diamonds and other gems. I mean, what do you think about that? And do you think they were stained in the blood of pro-democracy demonstrators?
I think it's very difficult, and that the royal family have to tread a diplomatic path in a sense, and that part of their job is to nod and take gifts. But I think in this case it was a mistake. I think that people will associate Bahrain with an extremely bloody regime, and I think it'd be better if our royal family didn't take gifts from them.
One wealthy person giving wealth to another wealthy person, or a family, and that in itself, I think, it can be slightly abhorrent when there are people starving. There are so many people who are hungry and needy at the moment around the world, and yet, and it probably makes it worse. Well, it does make it worse if it's bloodstained, but, it just, the fact that in itself, giving jewellery when there's so much poverty in the world.
Why do you think the King of Bahrain would give her 2 boxes of extremely expensive jewellery?
Well, I don't know how things work in those sorts of circles, but, it's they're obviously a wealthy family, wanting to keep relations good with the English royal family.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I don't know. I don't know the background to the story really, and what the motivation for it would be. But although I'd imagine that with something like that could obviously be a good PR thing for them if they want to encourage links between the two countries and so on. I could definitely imagine that could be a motivation. Yeah.
Well, it's not a secret that countries in the Persian Gulf have strong economic ties with the UK. The Queen actually, I remember correctly, went to visit the Emirates a few months ago. So I'm guessing that in order to strengthen these ties and to build a strong bonding between the two countries, or the UK and other countries in the Persian Gulf, they pretty much exchange gifts, do other things that show some bonding, some friendship.
Why do you think the King of Bahrain gave her these gems?
Very difficult question, isn't it? Is it to keep him with the British royal family? Is it to keep him with the government? There's always something behind a gift like this. You don't give things away like this for nothing.
Well, I guess, especially during the whole Arab uprisings, it's going to be a issue of balance on the part of the governments, to balance the existing relationships, with the ruling families or governments, but also trying to promote democracy and everything.
If you're going to give any jewellery for any kind of respect, it's going to be a political, show of faith in something, and perhaps that's a bastardisation of that.
Well, those are the views of the people here on the streets of London. Let's now find out what our experts think.
The first time I heard about it was when the Countess of Wessex and her husband, Prince Andrew, were in London on their way to Afghanistan. And it has been customary for the members of the royal family to visit the troops at the fronts, whether in Iraq or in Afghanistan or wherever they are. So it happened that they were going to Afghanistan and they made a stopover in Bahrain, and at which incident or occasion the ruler decided to invite them to his palace, where he handed them various kinds of jewelries. These specific jewels were given to high-ranking officials of the British establishment, in line with other jewels that would have definitely been given to ministers, to members of parliament, to journalists. Collectively, the aim is to bring pressure and to stop any influence by the opposition on these circles. For example, today we have been trying to get a stand from the British government against the human rights abuses in Bahrain. That is not forthcoming. The best we could do from Mr. Hague or from anyone else is that we are concerned. When this term is absolutely useless and meaningless, and it is not going to change the policy of any government.
I think the issue here is that you could give presents, and presents there is a limitation on how valuable they are. And indeed, when you actually give a present that is so expensive, that goes into millions, it becomes really more than just a present. It becomes a sort of a bribery. It becomes buying influence. And becomes buying influence, especially at the time when you know that people in Bahrain are suffering tremendously in the hand of not just Bahrainis, but also Saudis who have been brought in. And, there is no other government in the world that have brought foreign troops into its territory to kill its own citizens who are very peacefully demonstrating. I mean, unlike Libya or Syria, there is no even accusation that the masses in Bahrain are actually using any sort of violence whatsoever. Nobody goes around, sort of passing out that sort of presents. You don't, unless you're out of your mind. There is obviously something expected. The least was expected was to thank for legitimization of murdering of innocent Bahraini people.
So why has the UK been reluctant to criticise the crackdown on pro-democracy demonstrators by the Bahrain monarchy? Is it because the United States has a major naval base on the territory? And why does the West have a military presence in Bahrain? Well, let's find out what the people think.
I really don't know what MPs or the government's thinking about. Obviously there's some political reason behind it, and I suppose it's got something to do with money and contracts at the end of the day.
Why do you think the British government is not that critical of the crackdown in Bahrain, and promoting democracy there, unlike its comments in other countries?
It's a good question. I really don't know the answer. I suppose they've got quite a few things on their agenda at the moment, so I haven't really given it that much thought, but I don't suppose it's as a headliner state as Egypt or Tunisia. It's not probably a great British tourist area, so it probably doesn't have a very high profile.
Well, I'm well aware of the fact the UK has a lot of economic interests in the Middle East. It's been the centre of the world in terms of resources for the last 2,000 years, and no doubt this government, like many before it, have a lot of interest there.
Because when you have economic ties and you have things to lose and you have so much money at stake, then obviously you don't want to ruin your friendship, even though obviously it's kind of hypocritical to do something like that.
Why do you think Britain has not been very active in criticising the King of Bahrain for his crackdown on the democracy demonstrators?
Again, I think it comes into finance and oil and things like that. I don't think the government in this country want to upset them in any way. I think we rely too much on some of these countries with their oil and other things, and I think this is complete the whole reason.
Well, it is obviously because there are trade relations and also arms deals, I suppose. So you, as a British government, you obviously want to maintain this. So although they're trying to promote, human rights and all that comes with it, they will again have to balance it, and that's what the British government is doing, I guess.
Why do you think that the Britain and the US has military links with Bahrain? Why does it need them?
Like I say, it's imagine more, not necessarily anything particularly to do with Bahrain, but the countries that surround Bahrain. You want to keep a presence in that area. You're looking for a friendly ally who will let you do so, and I'd imagine Bahrain have been very good to us in the past.
I'd imagine it is perfectly situated militarily for a whole host of countries around. I mean, it's the Middle East, isn't it? So it's you've got like Iran, Iraq, you've got Israel as well there. So I'd imagine that is something that they would be, from a military point of view, that would be something they'd want to maintain, definitely. Yeah.
Well, like any kind of security issue, it's going to be important to have a few bases in an allied country, so to speak. But as far as that has anything to do with democracy, I don't think there's very little to do with it. I think it's really just a base and very little else.
Why do you think the US has a large naval base and Britain has close ties with the Bahrain monarchy, its military?
Because of the problems we have out there. You need to have a base, because at the moment certain parts of that area are on a knife edge.
It's not because it's Bahrain or it's Qatar, it's because it's in the Persian Gulf, and at the moment Iran is very much in the diplomatic and other lights of the United States.
Well, I think if you look at where Bahrain is, like strategically, it is a very important place to be. Like, it's very close to the Horn of Africa. It's one of the narrowest shipping lanes in the world there. Obviously, you've got the Middle East oil interests, and I think it's a similar reason to why the UK feels so strongly about keeping the Falkland Islands from Argentina. It's the geographical position obviously plays great importance.
Different opinions there from the streets of London. Well, let's now find out what our experts have to say.
My own feeling is that for decades they have been boasting of being the cradle of democracy. And when 20 years ago, 1990, 91, when the Eastern Europe revolted against the former Soviet Union and sought independence after the fragmentation of the second world power, the Western countries did not hesitate in offering all their psychological, political, media support to those revolutions that had broken away from the Soviet Union. So why? Because the Americans will always say that our forefathers have told us about democracy, and they had raised the banner of democracy, and this democracy has to be spread in the world.
UK has got a tremendous responsibility towards areas that was under its control, and we see that unfortunately we have failed those responsibilities, be it in Hong Kong or be it there. I mean, Hong Kong, all these years, we didn't create democracy there. And as we were handing it out to Chinese, we were saying, no, we should have democracy, now we should have democracy. And this is almost the same situation in Bahrain, but even much worse, because in Bahrain, the whole history is not just supporting of the oppressive dictatorship, but also we have sent people like Henderson down there, which was a chief of the security, which actually tortured hundreds and thousands of people. While he was also, when he was in Kenya, he was he's a known torturer. So we actually not only unleash this sort of people on them, but then we give Henderson also a Queen sort of medal. I mean, this is outrageous that, we unleash these sort of people, we support these sort of people, we support these principles. And again, the issue of interest of masses, it becomes totally irrelevant. And I actually urge our government that, go beyond that. We need to have relationship with the people, with the whole nation, and whole nation is not dictators. If we have a principle that Jack Straw had to apologize, accidentally shaking hand of Mugabe, then really I think, if you go by the same principle, not only should be given back, but there should be an apology that this was actually totally unacceptable behavior. Not just because of this incident, because I actually believe many other Jews, many other prisons are being given by these tyrants to our representatives, and they are perceived by these governments, these tyrants, as a bribery, and really should be, we should have no sort of tolerance towards this sort of behavior.
Until the 1970s, Britain governed Bahrain as if it were a colony. So does it now have a responsibility to promote democracy in the country? And what about those jewels? Buckingham Palace says the Countess of Wessex can keep them. But does she have a moral obligation to return them to the King of Bahrain and his uncle, the Prime Minister? Let's find out what the people think.
I think that a step on from that, we should move away from colonialism and actually, as one of the leading countries in the world, be fostering that democracy internationally.
Bahrain was a UK colony up till 40 years ago. Should Britain therefore help to promote democracy in the country?
It certainly can't hurt. I mean, obviously, Western civilization based on the idea of a democracy, and it seems to work well for us, but we've got to be quite cautious of imposing our values and our views on another country, another culture which hasn't always seen that way. It's nothing to say that we couldn't slowly, bit by bit, try and show the benefits of those ideals to these people, but it's quite difficult, I'd imagine, just to go in and like I say, impose your views and a democratic view?
No, I think they should try and foster democracy. I think that's probably the better way to perceive the general population. I think they want to change. I think Bahrain royal family should possibly either denounce their monarchy or think of a way of politically changing the way that Bahrain is run. I don't think the way that they're going about it is particularly clever. I think it's only going to continue the bloodshed.
I guess Britain as a colonial interest is always going to have a difficult role to play because, I mean, obviously as a third party it can foster talks between the two of them. However, I'm not sure a lot of people will be interested to see Britain take a more active role if there's going to be anti-colonial feelings in Bahrain, so I wouldn't be able to say much more.
Bahrain was in effect a British colony until 40 years ago. Do you think Britain should have a duty to promote democracy in the country?
No, I don't. In the same way that we deal with a lot of the colonies that used to be under the British rule, I think when they're handed over, if we can help them either financially or with resource, then obviously we should always try and do what we can. But I also think it's important for these countries to have their own identity, to work their own way, and especially with countries such as Bahrain, they are very different to the UK in how they want to work, how they want to be seen, and how people out there live their lives. So I think to a certain extent you have to, they know what they're doing, just lead them to it.
I think it depends on what type of democracy that you're pushing and in the ways that we do it. I think it's very important, given colonial history, that Britain offers support for past colonies, because I feel that we have a duty to these countries because we did exploit them, and you could argue that some of the situation that they're in is inherently our fault. Whether it's us pushing liberal democracy on them, I would disagree with that. I think it very much needs to be like an organic process which involves the people of Bahrain.
Do you think that the Countess of Wessex should hand back these expensive gemstones?
Very much so. Very much so.
Obviously that's a decision for the royal family, and that it depends on what statement they want to make, so if they want to send a clear statement that they're against the killings, then yeah, it would be a perfect opportunity to do that, but I suppose that's up to them.
Yes, I do think they should send them back, actually.
Do you think Sophie should give them back?
Yeah, I think that would be an excellent idea.
If you ask me, I think the royal family should really give back any gifts they're given or put them on public display, but it's just my own personal thoughts, so yes.
It's not for us to return. It was gifted to the royal family.
That's all we've got time for this week. Thanks for joining us. If you've got something to say yourself, send an email to asimplequestion@presstv.com. That's asimplequestion@presstv.com. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.